Good morning. My name is Melany Spiehs, and my family and I have been coming to the Abbey now for about 7 years, which is amazing. So since Easter, here at the Abbey, we have been exploring our role in caring for the environment. And this morning, I just want to share a bit more of my story as it relates to this topic. I'm a teacher, so I brought props and visuals. And we're going to start with a story. So as I read this story, this is an indigenous creation story, and the story was passed down by the Haudenosaunee people, who are an alliance among 6 Native American nations in northeast North America. So as I read this story, just settle in if closing your eyes feels right, or you can settle your gaze on this picture of Turtle Island. Long before the world was created, there was an island in the sky, inhabited by sky people. One day, a pregnant sky woman drops through a hole created by an uprooted tree and begins to fall for what seems like eternity. Coming out of the darkness, she eventually sees oceans. The animals from this world congregate, trying to understand what they see in the sky. A flock of birds is sent to help her. The birds catch her and gently guide her down onto the back of Great Turtle. The water animals like otter and beaver have prepared a place for her on Turtle's back. They bring mud from the bottom of the ocean and place it on Turtle's back until solid earth begins to form and increase in size. Turtle's back becomes Sky Woman's home, and the plants she's brought down with her from Sky World are her medicine. She makes a life for herself and becomes the mother of Haudenosaunee life as we know it today. This story is a little bit different than the creation story that was passed down to me. In my creation story, the woman Eve was created to be a helpmate to Adam, the man. She was not the hero of the story, for sure. In her deep longing for knowledge, she fell into temptation from the serpent. And then her and Adam were cast out of the Garden of Eden, and God cursed the ground. So in one story, we have a human helping to create the Garden of Eden, and in the other, humans are exiled from the garden. In one story, the animals and plants help to protect the human, and in the other, the animal is harmful and the ground is cursed. And I just wonder what impact these stories have on our ability to connect with the natural world. So thankfully, I had parents and grandparents who helped me cultivate my love for the outdoors. My mother tells me that when I was young, I was happiest when I was outside, and I spent my days exploring plants, using all of my senses, which probably worried my mother a little bit, and I climbed into any tree that I could reach. I remember my mom spending hours outside caring for her flower garden, which attracted many beautiful insects, butterflies to our yard. My dad built me an insect house, which continued to spark my love for these creatures. My grandparents on my dad's side were farmers, so I grew up watching them take care of the land and the land sustaining our family that way. And then my mom's parents were amazing gardeners, and I remember spending summers with my grandpa out in his garden, probably supposed to be picking beans, but I was probably looking for grasshoppers, and then carrying the fruits inside and helping my grandmother can and preserve the harvest. So in the book Braiding Sweetgrass, Robin Wall Kimmerer weaves together indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge, and teaching of plants. And in this book, she writes that in some native languages, the term for plants translates to those who take care of us. The earth has cared for me throughout my life, and in response, I feel a need to care back. This reciprocal relationship grounded in gratitude is what I want to invite you to explore with me today. So as a young child, nature taught me how to be curious. Spending time out observing really helped hone my observation skills, which have been very helpful to me as an educator. And also, nature has helped me learn how to take risks. So climbing trees taught me what my body was capable of doing, which gave me confidence in my ability to assess risk throughout my entire life. In turn, I thought it was my job to protect the natural world, and especially vulnerable creatures. I remember when I was 5 years old, on my grandparents' farm, we were in the kitchen, and I overheard an adult conversation about this beautiful tree that was outside that I loved to climb in, and how it had been overtaken with caterpillars. And so my grandpa was going to get the pesticides and spray the tree. So I quickly slipped outside and frantically started pulling the caterpillars off of the tree and telling them to run, go. And so when my grandpa found me, he laughed and let a few of them slide away. Another way that nature has cared for me is during the pandemic, when it didn't feel safe always to be indoors. I know many of us retreated to the outdoors. And in turn, I think we were really mindful of staying home and reducing our emissions. And I remember watching videos, seeing photos of places on the earth that were just flourishing because of this. And then when I was a preschool teacher, the natural world taught these things to my students. So taking my students outdoors taught them how to explore and be curious and take risks. And then in turn, we helped keep our outdoor classroom clean, free of litter, and free of invasive weeds. Kimmerer also refers to plants as our oldest teachers, and I want to share some things that I've learned today from my best teachers. So I brought with me today one of my favorite houseplants. Please don't tell the other ones. This is called a pitcher plant, and what's cool about this plant is it's carnivorous. So instead of getting their nutrients from the soil, they get it from their catch. So this plant has had to adapt to survive in areas with deficient soil, but those adaptations have helped other life as well. So it's helped humans by catching and collecting those insects that can bite and sting and harm. Also, humans have used the pitchers throughout time as drinking vessels. If this plant were growing out in the wild, the vessels would be a lot larger instead of like friendly communion buddy size. Another teacher I want to introduce you to is one of my favorite plants, moss. Moss is called the carpet of the forest. And this is a picture from when our family went with the Berg family to Glacier National Park, and the moss we saw there was incredible. Moss is one of the most simple and primitive plants. So it only has a stem and a leaf, has no roots, no flowers, no seeds, but it inhabits nearly every ecosystem on the earth. There are more than 22,000 species of moss. They can grow in such tiny spaces, so in cracks of sidewalks and even on the backs of beetles. They take only the little that they need, but they give back in abundance. So they absorb small amounts of water from the air, and then they offer it back to support the lives of rivers, trees, birds, reptiles. And throughout history, moss has also provided humans with some things. It provided soft packing material, and it also provided a very highly absorbent material used for diapering babies. So moss teaches us reciprocity. And then one more is this plant is called Plantago major, or the common plantain. And if you've spent any time outdoors around here, you have probably seen this plant. It grows everywhere. So this plant arrived in North America with some of the first colonizers. Indigenous people called it white man's footstep because it did kind of spread quickly and everywhere. At first they didn't trust it, but believed that all things have a purpose, so let it be. This plant it does spread, but it's not invasive. It won't choke out other plants. And every part of this plant is useful. So you can use the leaves. You can eat the leaves in the spring when they're tender and they're full of vitamins. You can also crush up the leaves or chew them to a poultice and they can provide relief for insect bites, for cuts, for burns. They have antibacterial properties. And then the tiny seeds are good medicine for digestion. So this plant taught us how to come to a new place and make ourselves welcome. So it said, be helpful, fit into the empty spaces, coexist with others, and heal wounds. And I just wonder how different things might have been if we had listened to this teacher. Another place I want to look to for wisdom about the natural world are the Gospels. So the authors of the Gospels thought it was important to include the many times that Jesus found refuge in the natural world. Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke all talk about Jesus spending 40 days out in the wilderness, following his baptism before starting his ministry, and even mentioned that he was with the wild animals at this time. And then the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus retreats privately onto the sea by boat after hearing that his friend John the Baptist was murdered. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all recount Jesus spending his last moments before his arrest in the Garden of Gethsemane. So time and time again, we hear of Jesus retreating into solitude in nature, where I'm sure that he found God. And I can attest to that this part of the world is full of natural beauty. My family and I got to spend a little bit of time in Greece last summer, and not too far off from where Jesus' story happens, but have never seen beauty like that anywhere. Plants were also woven into Jesus' entire life. From birth to death, they cared for him. So at his birth, when he was young, the wise ones offered him the gifts of frankincense and myrrh. And frankincense comes from the sap of the boswellia tree. It has anti-inflammatory properties used to treat a variety of ailments. And myrrh is a resin from the camphora tree and carries antibacterial properties. So really practical gifts for a new mother. Jesus used the natural world also for teachers, just like Kimmerer. So there are stories of fig trees and mustard seeds, lilies of the field. Jesus used metaphors of pruning, planting in fertile soil. And it's as if Jesus was telling us to look closer and to pay attention. And then after his death, plants were used to preserve and care for his broken body. Aloe and myrrh were the plants typically used at that time. Breeding sweetgrass communicates that one of the most effective things we can do to care for the earth is to plant a garden. If it's not possible for us to plant a garden, maybe we can join in a community garden near us. Not only is gardening critical for the health of the earth, but it also keeps us healthy. So in addition to providing healthy food for us, there are spending time in the soil exposes us to really important microbes, which are good for our heart, our skin, and our mental well-being. So when gardeners tell you that they're happiest when they're gardening, then we need to believe them because it's true. But sometimes gardening is not possible. Maybe we don't have the resources. So Kimmerer offers some very accessible steps that we can take to enter into this relationship with gratitude and reciprocity with the natural world. First is to pay attention. Attention, she says, is the doorway to gratitude and to wonder. Spending time watching and noticing the way that ants move along the ground or the breeze feels on our skin, and then offering a word of gratitude back. Second is to use the grammar of animacy. So the English language tends to be obsessed with the word it, which is a fine word to use if we're talking about inanimate objects. But when we're speaking of the more than human world, can we maybe find some more gentle words to use with our kin, the plants, the animals, the trees? This does take practice, and it takes a shift in our mindset from a creation story of separation from the earth to one of connection. And last, can we learn to accept love back from the earth? Loving the earth isn't very hard. If we just even look out the window, we see beauty, natural beauty. But might we be brave enough to believe that the earth can actually love us back? This morning, we have barely had a chance to scratch the surface of this beautiful book. But don't worry, because on June 1st, Saturday morning at 9, we're going to have a space of connection around this book. And we're going to connect with each other and connect with the earth as well in a beautiful space. We're going to spend some time in observation, so we'll set aside time to pay attention. And then also have a time of creativity where we'll be making some art and not judging each other's art, for sure. I want to just leave you with one more piece of wisdom from Kimmerer. She says, action on behalf of life transforms. Because the relationship between self and the world is reciprocal, it is not a question of first getting enlightened or saved and then acting. As we work to heal the earth heals us. May we have the courage.